Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is our Community and Neighborhood Enhancement Advisory Board meeting, September 10th, 2018. Thank you all for being here. First item is call this meeting to order. Thank you. Next is approved minutes for the August 6, 2018 meeting.
Motion to approve.
Do I hear a second? Move to second. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Thank you. Next is items for discussion/action. First is street resurfacing projects. Morning, Eric.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this morning we're going to start introducing some additional staff that are working on the Better Street, Safer City program. And so as part of our construction update for our streets, I'm going to introduce Brock Miner. He's a Public Works program manager that's helping oversee all of the construction activities that are on the streets. So I'm going to welcome him to the podium, and so he's going to give your update this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Winger. Mr. Chairman, I'll go through the construction update. And the first slide here we have is a map. Before we had the list of all the projects, we had the first 16 early start projects along with 41 additional projects and everything, but we decided to go with the map here, just kind of show all the progress going on throughout the city. We kind of have everything color-coded a little differently. All the completed projects are in green, which we do have some green projects, and we're shortly going to add quite a few more of the green projects, completed projects for you. The red is the construction projects, all the projects we have in construction, and there's quite a few of those as well. The orange, what we have is work orders are issued to contractors, so they're ready to go. They just may be a few weeks out, and so as soon as they're ready and we get all the traffic control and everything in place and let the general public know what's going on out there, they'll be ready to get started. And all the blues will be the future, so that'll probably be less and less as we move forward. The first project I have for you is Southwest 29th Western to Shields. This project, we've completed all the intersection work, you know, the ADA upgrades, traffic signal detection, and everything. And so they moved on to all the curb and gutter repairs, and they've also completed all the base repairs, you know, failures in the road there that they needed to address. And as you see here, the picture on the left, it shows a milling operation, which I believe they've milled everything. And in the picture on the right, they're starting to pave everything. So hopefully they'll finish that up here shortly. The next project is Rockwell, Wilshire to Britain. That project has it has already been milled and overlaid. So they finished all that. And what we're showing here on the picture on the left, there's the intersection at Wilshire and Rockwell was concrete. And there were several panels there that needed to be replaced, and so it's a large portion there, but we tore all those panels out, and they're the finished grade and compaction efforts. And then the picture on the right shows, it's kind of a reverse, but it's still Wilshire and Rockwell there. But it shows that they've set up all their forms, and they're pouring concrete. So hopefully the moment that cures out, we can seal the cracks or seal all the joints and get that back open for traffic. The next project we have here is Southwest 104th Western to Santa Fe. And as you see, that project, we've milled the surface and we've overlaid the surface. We have the construction tabs there. Hopefully, weather permitting, we can get in there and get that striped as soon as possible. We also do have some work on that project, some concrete repairs there at Santa Fe. That intersection had some concrete in it, and so we're doing some panel replacements. Not quite as extensive as the other project, but that work's going on as well. Skipped one there. Northeast 63rd and Midwest Boulevard to Douglas is another project. We just kind of got started, so some of the first things we did out there, you can see the picture on the left, that's a pretty rough road. As long as the base is good on that kind of stuff, we'll put a leveling course down to kind of smooth that off, and then we'll put our final lift of asphalt on there. On the right, you can hardly see it, but we did some edge mill. That one comes up to a bridge, a pretty extensive bridge, and so where the curb and gutter there, what we do is we edge mill that so our finished surface kind of ties back into that, so it makes a smooth transition. So hopefully we'll finish all the base repairs and get started resurfacing that project here pretty soon. Here's a project, Wilshire Spencer Road to the east to the city limits. And as you see the picture on the left, that's a PCI, a pavement condition index of right around 14. And you can see that's pretty bad. You can see the alligator cracking. There's a lot of rutting. You've even see there's a base repair has been done previous. And so on those kind of roads, it's something that we can't repair. And so we reconstruct the whole thing. In that picture, you can see they take a blade and they blade off the edge of the road, kind of expose that edge of asphalt. And then what they do is they'll incorporate that asphalt into the base, and then the picture on the right shows they come in with stabilization material, and they'll stabilize that base to, and make it a whole lot harder and stiffer. And then as soon as that cures out, we'll start putting our final lifts of asphalt on there. This one's County Line, Hefner to Northwest 122nd. On the left there, you see milling operations. And so on this particular project, which you can see, the picture on the right, that's Hefner Road. Hefner Road has an intersection that's been widened, and so it will transition back down into a two-lane, about 200 foot, and so that's kind of the picture showing that transition. And you can see the additional road closure sign up ahead, and that's where currently what they have done is they've milled all the existing asphalt. This particular project, instead of the stabilization material that you saw on the other one, what we're coming in with this one is a 6-inch aggregate base, and then we'll come in with another 6-inch of asphalt, so there'll be several lifts on there. We currently have most of the ag base down, and so weather permitting, hopefully we'll start getting that compacted, slicked off, and we'll start doing our lifts of asphalt. This is Northeast 178th Indian Meridian to XXX. And the same thing on the left, you see where they bladed off to expose the edge of that. This project will be the same as not the previous one, but the one before that. They'll incorporate the asphalt into the base. They'll stabilize that, which they've already done. And then you see on the right that they're finishing the existing lifts of asphalt as we speak. And then I'll close out with these last two slides. These are a couple of projects that have been complete. So hopefully we'll get them on the map as completed projects. We'll final these out. But this project was both Northeast 122nd, both of these projects were the same way. We incorporated the existing asphalt into the base. We stabilized those roads, and then we came in with lifts of asphalt, and these were right before the rain, and so we were able to get them striped, and we'll do a final on that and finish those projects out and get those shown as complete. Here's another picture of the same area, 2 miles that abut up to each other. And the picture on the left is a paving operation, and then the picture on the right shows it as a finished product. And that being said, I'll turn it back over to Mr. Winger for 3A number 2.
Any questions on the construction update? I think you'll see that there's a lot of activity that's in the city. It's in all areas of the city. And so we continue to push forward. So one of the things that we're going to start experiencing, and something you've seen in the last month, is we probably will see some slowing just due to the weather. A lot of the rain will slow contractors down immensely. When temperatures get colder, we do have restrictions on when we can actually place concrete and asphalt. And it's not a worker issue, it's more of a materials issue. So we cannot place concrete and we can't do asphalt when it's at freezing temperatures, and we're going to run into those here soon. But we do plan to pursue the good weather days during the winter months, and so we will not completely shut down. But you're probably going to see a slight slowing as we go into especially November, December. So. All right, we're going to go to our next agenda item. This is item 3A, resurfacing projects. One of the things that we noted on the map, and something that you're going to find a little bit later in the agenda, so I'm going to kind of talk about this now. We have an implementation plan amendment for your consideration today, and it's really the action item, the final action item that's on the agenda. The items that I'm getting ready to present to you, the items that Jeff Butler from Planning is going to present to you are included in that plan for your consideration today. So if you have questions now, it might help us a little bit later to save some questions when we actually present the plan. But as we go forward, you'll see that we have written literally work orders on nearly all of the resurfacing projects. There are a few that we have not yet, but we've kept the contractors very active with a list, and so we're nearing the end of being able to write work orders. The item that is for your consideration now is actually to consider additional work orders. You'll recall we had the 16 early start, and this is that list that was approved in our January meeting that allowed us to get out there and write work orders quickly. All of these were bond projects, and we are using our existing city contracts to do these, so we didn't have to go through a bidding process. We had already anticipated doing a lot of this work up front. And so that has advanced very, very quickly. This is the unfunded arterial street list that then we approved next. This list, again, added 41 additional projects for consideration and an additional $22 million in authorization. And this is that list that we're now getting to the end of. These are those color-coded project locations that Brock just showed you on the construction status map. But this is a new list today that we're asking for your consideration. And so we're going to spend just a minute describing what's on this list. You might recall that we had previously considered methodologies for the ranking of projects. There were some questions by some of the board members about some of the scoring. You might recall that as we were looking at that previous list, the next several dozen projects had the identical score of 4.6. And one of the commitments that we had made is that we're working on a new software program that's going to allow us to be a lot more granular in our scoring. We're going to be able to get better scores for arterial streets so that we can present those and better assess what should be next. On our residential streets, we're going to actually break it from square mile down to individual neighborhood or quarter mile, and that's what that new software is going to allow us to do. We could not have that done by this meeting this month. We could not have that done by this morning. So what staff has done is they've used that existing list. They've done some field investigation. We are also receiving a lot of comments, continued comments on some of the bond projects that are not yet authorized. Ones that are, again, if you recall on the bond projects, they were the worst streets in the city. That's the reason that they were included in the bond program. Yet we are not selling bonds again until 2019 and 2020. I mean, some of those very high priority roads may not be constructed without the assistance of the sales tax until future years. We have included a mix of projects for your consideration this morning. The ones that are identified in yellow, the ones that are shaded in yellow, are existing bond projects on the 2017 bond issue. They're very high priority, and we will ask for your consideration in those today. The ones that are not shaded, that are in white, those are the ones that are, again, generally those 4.6 scores that staff has gone out with consultants and verified that they are, again, high priority, but all new locations. So we do have a mix of new, a mix of some of the bond, and so we're recommending for your consideration 27 projects with an additional authorization of $24 million, and these would be on arterial streets throughout the city. This is what that looks like on a disbursement slide. So if you're looking at the city as a whole, these are dispersed throughout the city. So we've got them north, south, east, and west. We would coordinate the construction with the existing contractors that we have currently working. We still are maintaining between 8 and 10 contractors in a little more than 20 different contracts to actually complete this work. And so with your consideration today, this would be an additional 27 projects, again, including some of the top priority bond projects that we continue to receive a lot of information on, and then the next series of new projects that are part of the previous advisory board list. Are there some questions on the arterials as we talk about just that for a moment? Are there some questions about the recommendation from staff? None yet? Okay. Also included for your consideration as we advance, you recall that we had 3 residential projects that were previously approved. These are the next 3 that we're going to recommend. These 2 also come off of the residential list. These are not currently bond projects. but these are three of the higher priority projects. Now, in the absence of the new software that's going to help us rank residential streets better, recall that the list that we presented to you was by square mile, and we don't think that approving projects by square mile going forward is in the best interest. And so you're going to see here that these are very specific neighborhoods or very specific quarter mile sections as we get a lot more granular prior to actually getting that software and that system in place. So as we go to this map, you'll see that these are three locations, two in more northwest Oklahoma City, one in southeast Oklahoma City, based on field verification, based on the previous prioritization and some of our methodologies that are coming up as that next highest group projects. There's going to be additional recommendations made, but as we go into these future months, as we get ready to exhaust the work orders that we have the capability of issuing, we're wanting to also make sure that we can issue additional residential work orders for resurfacing as well. So this will not complete the residential program, but it takes that next small step in making sure that as we go into those winter months, staff can proceed. And again, these would be included in this implementation plan amendment that's later in the agenda. So again, as we kind of summarize that resurfacing, we have a next group of 27 arterials, 3 residentials, and I'd be happy to answer some questions about that today.
I just had a quick question. Eric, what were those residential resurfacing projects scoring?
So these are scoring, remember the previous scores were by square mile. We have attempted to do some scoring on these individual residential streets, and it's difficult for us to do that without the software, so we're relying a lot on the visual observations. And so what we're finding is there is significant cracking of the streets. They're clearly in need of the resurfacing. I don't have the scores that I can offer you this morning, so I'm very sorry. But they are more higher priority, and I can definitely, as we bring that software back, we're going to have a better scoring system to show you. And we would hope to have that by the next meeting.
It says Better Street, Safer City. Nowhere does it say MAPS 3 on there. Now that we're moving and talking somewhat about MAPS 4 in 2019, is that a possibility to add that in future signage? So
I think on the Better Street, Safer City, and there were some of the construction photos that you saw that we had the logo. So Better Street, Safer City was not MAPS 3. It's technically not MAPS 4. It is using a temporary sales tax, but that was where we had branded this program Better Street, Safer City, and not specifically MAPS, although it's using a MAPS similar revenue process. I think that when we get into the MAPS 4 projects, that may be a future discussion. I think you probably see some MAPS 4 branding, possibly, but I don't think that'll be a part of this specific program.
Even though some of the funds that are being used are MAPS 3 sales tax extension funds?
So I would say that, yes, it is the sales tax that is collecting funds for Better Street, Safer City, but it's not specifically a MAPS 3 extension. I mean, it was a separate vote by the voters of Oklahoma City under the brand of Better Street, Safer City. So I think the city staff was as careful as possible to brand it as Better Street, Safer City, and the logo that we've included even on like the implementation plan. So this logoing, Mr. Chairman, is more what was anticipated as opposed to a MAPS brand for Better Street, Safer City. But I do think that you'll see some things for MAPS 4.
I'm sure you get a number of comments when these streets are closed.
Yes.
Of unhappy citizens. When the streets are finished, are you getting positive feedback as well?
You know, I'd like to say that the good comments always rush in on city projects. We typically only hear the bad. Yes, we do periodically get those good comments, but no, we don't nearly get as many accolades when we finish work. But I do think that as we complete more and more work, as we start to see those PCI scores starting to climb higher and higher, I think we would expect to see that on maybe future citizen surveys. I think one of the things that we saw at City Council here just a couple of weeks ago was the presentation of the citizen survey, and one of the questions is condition of city streets. Really, the reason that Better Street, Safer City is here is because of it being the top priority of our citizens in improving the quality of streets. The score is not a good score that we received again this year, but I will tell you it was better than last year. And I would hope that next year is better than this year. So as we continue to monitor that citizen survey, I think we're going to be looking at it for some of our feedback. But we're always happy to receive the email or the phone call if they call. So.
Thank you.
So I did have a question. There are action items associated with this presentation? Right. So we have.
So if there's no question specifically to the two lists that I'm presenting, what we'd like to do is have you take action that confirms that list. You're actually going to make a formal action on it at the end of the agenda where it's actually part of the implementation plan that you'd recommend to the City Council.
Okay. I do have, excuse me, one question in regards to that. Specifically on the arterial surfacing, because I kind of understand the neighborhood resurfacing a little better. And this is a little bit maybe more of a broader question, Eric, but so the highlighted projects from the GO bond, I'm just kind of always curious because I feel like this sort of board was put together in a real intentional way to make sure we had a lot of representation for how we dealt with these dollars. So as we sort of fund projects that are actually in the funded project list for the GO bond, what happens next with those resources once this work is done? And kind of what's the process for figuring out what happens next,
Sure.
Or what's next on the list for those projects?
So that's a great question. So if you recall, the Better Street, Safer City initiative is a $240 million initiative in the 5 project categories, and in the street resurfacing, it's $168 million that's projected to be spent out of Better Street, Safer City. So our goal is to take $168 million sales tax dollars and best spend them towards streets, which some of them are recommending as bond. If we complete the bond project that's listed as a part of the Better Street, Safer City tax initiative, we will absolutely have the opportunity then to surplus those bond funds once they are sold in a future year and apply them to a different street. So just because we do perhaps Northwestern from Wilshire to Britain as a sales tax, when we sell that bond money for Northwestern from Wilshire to Britain, but it's already a completed project, that money will be applied to another street that's in need. And so as we work on that comprehensive paving management list, our goal internally is that we're going to have a running list for years to come. The bond program being a 10-year program, as we complete projects, we're simply, whether we run out of sales tax monies and start using bond monies or come into grant funds or county project agreements, we're able to work that list from top to bottom, worst street to best street. So my assurance to you is that the bond monies don't get used in another way other than the paving of city streets. There is a bond advisory committee and there's also an advisory board that serves on the bond funds that also receive similar recommendations. Obviously not this exact same group, but there is oversight of the bond funds, and so there'll be an assurance that they're spent, if they're for resurfacing, on resurfacing, if they're for widening, on widening, and other types of projects. This really, I know it's difficult for me to make this recommendation to you on some of the bond projects, but I just want to reiterate, these are the worst streets in the city. And as we delay those streets, and as you saw some of those presentations, if the street gets too far gone, we can't actually resurface it anymore. We have to completely replace it, which is at a much higher cost. So we're actually trying to do a little bit of catch-up and not let those worst streets get any worse. But again, we are open to recommendations, and that's the reason for the board. The board is to help, receive some guidance, some information from staff, but it is ultimately your recommendation to the council that's important to us.
Yeah, so this is maybe just more of a comment in regards to that, and just kind of thinking ahead. I think as we start to work down some of these projects, it would be good, and I'm sure we'll probably have the opportunity to do this at some point several months into the future. But as we get these projects moving, it'd be good to see how that impacts the overall list and sort of what the thinking or prioritization there is, and that's just kind of helpful to give me more kind of confidence in the impact of the decisions we're making today. But I appreciate that explanation.
So I think, again, my commitment to you is by our next meeting that we're going to bring a comprehensive list that's going to have a more granular scoring system, so you're not going to see just dozens of projects that are 4.6. I think that's what we found as we got down the initial list. Everything was a 4.6. But we're also planning next year to sell some bond funds. So I don't think for too much longer do we need to keep doing bond projects that come next spring. We'll actually have hopefully some bond money to fund bond program, and then sales tax is just sales tax.
Eric, just as a quick review, we have the first 16 early start projects. Are the majority of those now complete?
No, there's still a few that are underway. Some of the early start projects also have some cooperative county agreements that we're finalizing those agreements. If you recall, on the county agreements, we enter into 50-50 funding options, which help us further expand that money. So of the original authorizations, we'll probably come back with some surplus monies from that original 16 that was originally thought to be 18.9 million. I believe we'll be bringing some of that money back to the board for reauthorization. So no, they're not all finished.
Okay. The second was 41
Yes.
additional projects, and now what we're looking at is the third phase that you're wanting us to do an action item on today.
And it's an additional 27 on the arterials. So when you look at those totals, there was $18.9 million in the original 16 early start. There was $22 million in the last set that was approved at 41. Today would be 27 additional for $24 million. So if we were to total that today, it would be 84 projects totaling about $65 million. Of the 168 that's a part of the entire program. So we're right at about that 30% level of authorizations under the sales tax. We still have about 2/3 of the program ahead of us.
So your 84 projects would be approximately 1/3.
At least the arterial. So let's talk about the summary of the residential. We had 3 residential that were also previously approved at $14 million. We're recommending 3 additional today at $6.5. The reason, and again, the number's so much lower than the 14 and it's 3 projects, is it's not by mile, it's by neighborhood or quarter section. So if we were to total those today, and the residential total will be 20.5, if we totaled those today, it'd be about $85 million in resurfacing citywide under the program at about 50%. So if you look at the residential included, we're coming up on the 50% mark of the program with approval today. And we're 9 months into the program of a 27-month. I would say that we're really on track. I think when we asked to really get out there ahead and we had the opportunity to do arterial resurfacing, I think we were projecting that we'd like to have about half of the authorization done by the end of the year, and we're really close to that, at least in the resurfacing portion of the program.
Eric, I'm sorry to be repetitive, but when we see these projects, we'd like to know what's reflective in our own ward.
Yes. Okay.
And I'm not seeing that on these forms.
So one of the things that we've done, if we'll fast forward just to, we're hoping that the mapping system, which we're also being able to place this online, would be most helpful. I can absolutely get you the ward numbers too, but we're trying to keep it in a mapping form if possible. I'd be happy to respond to you on the wards too. Okay. Yeah, let me look at that for our next meeting. We get into a difficult conversation sometimes about wards, and I understand. And you represent wards, and we have some at-large members too that are representing the city as a whole. We're really trying to make sure that we're addressing the highest priority streets, right? And it's difficult to talk about wards sometimes, but I know it's important information, so I want to get that to you.
Right, and I know my ward best.
Yes, you do. Absolutely. So let me make sure we get that information to you before next meeting. So if there's no other questions on the recommendations for the arterial and the residential, we'd move to the item 2, recommend the group of projects for funding. So looking at both of those lists, if the list of 27 arterial and the list of 3 new residential are in agreement, we would like to receive a recommendation of the advisory board to include those in the program. You'll take another vote with the implementation plan later in the meeting.
Move to receive recommended list.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. 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 All opposed? Nay. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to the next item, 3B. And both Jeff Butler and I are going to take this one together. I'm going to start, and then we're going to switch. This is talking about the street enhancement projects. But one of the things that's unique and something that's a little bit different as we get out of some of the resurfacing work is we're looking at those additional 4 categories that are better street, safer city. Street enhancements being a large component of that. We had mentioned last month that we'd like to use the advisory board members on our selection committees. These better street, safer city street initiatives, they're going to require us to engage an independent consultant, an independent engineer, an independent landscape architects to actually help us with the designs. It's not something that's traditionally done in-house. And so what I'm presenting to you this morning is that the city has a consultant selection procedure that engages architects and engineers through a resolution of the City Council that was last amended in 1986, but it includes all of the procedures and the policies and the guidance for staff on these selections. And so this is something that would apply to not just streetscapes, although we're in the streetscape section, but for those trails that might need design, for those sidewalks that might need design, or possibly the bike infrastructure. We might use this process in those other categories as well, but we'll focus a little bit on streetscapes this morning. When we look at this overall process, there's a lot of local architects and engineers that have a lot of experience in their field. We've used consultants in the past on previous streetscapes, but the general process when we talk about the consultant selection, the city staff will issue an advertisement. It's actually published in local newspapers. It's also on the city's website to let all of those individuals that are interested in participating an ability to submit a letter of interest. And those letters of interest are actually received in the Department of Public Works, where we compile all of those. I would tell you that on a typical project, it's not uncommon for us to get 20 or 25 proposals on a single project. So this procedure helps us, how do you go from 20 to 25 down to a consultant, one, that's actually going to work on the project. And so as we look at this, and some of the outline that I'll show you is that once that letter of interest is received, we identify a selection committee. And that typical committee includes a representative of the city manager's office, a representative of the Public Works Department and the city engineer's office, which is myself, but then the participating department. So in this case, it would also include the planning department. And that's what the typical selection committee looks like. But on the MAPS initiatives, on Maps for Kids, on MAPS 3, and then when we have some specialty projects, the procedure actually allows us to add 2 additional committee members. And so we'd like those 2 additional committee members to be members of this board to actually participate on those selections. And so as we look at maybe a project that has a ward, the streetscapes in a particular Ward 1 through Ward 8, potentially maybe the ward representative would represent that one slot, and then maybe one of the at-large members would be assigned that second spot. And I think what we'd recommend is that we might work through the chairman to make those assignments with the ability that we could coordinate that outside of this public meeting, but we could identify and do rotations so that everybody that wanted to participate could. You're not required. We'll make sure that the selections proceed should we not be able to make schedules work, but we definitely want you to be included in that process as we kind of go through. Once you're on the committee, you would get that 20 to 25 proposals, and you would be asked to rank those proposals from your highest to least who you think is most qualified. Those are then ranked and scored with the other committee members, and we generally get that list down to 3 that we're actually going to interview. So we go from 20 plus down to 3. We then schedule the interviews, and the committee members would be then invited to that interview where you interview the 3, where you re-rank and you get to 1. And once we're at that 1, we would bring that recommendation back to the full board for recommendation to the council to negotiate a contract with that firm for that particular project. And that's completely part of what we do on every project in the city that requires consultant services. Once that project is approved by the council with that firm, staff then takes over, negotiates the contract. Now the contract would come back to the board and be approved, and then work begins. And so then we go through a typical design process from there. But at least as we outline the architect and engineer selection process, it's reviewing proposals, it's going to an interview, and it's making a recommendation on the firm. But the whole board actually makes that final recommendation, even though maybe 2 members were part of the more detailed process. When we talk about engineering contracting, this is a contract that you're going to start seeing in the future as we select those consultants. The fees are negotiated by staff. We have a lot of historical perspective on what fees should be for types of projects that we're going to get into, whether it's streetscapes, trails, sidewalks, or other. But we will be bringing those contracts back to the advisory board for recommendation to the city council. But that's the point at which we're able to officially start work with a consultant. As it relates to streetscapes, we're actually looking at the board having, quite a bit of involvement, and there's really 5 things that we think that you're going to have a lot of participation in, and I've listed them here. This is a slide that the planning department has helped put together just to help us get more organized, but you're going to see the first step is that interviews and selection that I just mentioned. But when we talk specifically about streetscapes, you're going to see that we're including stakeholder meetings, confirming priorities. There's going to be public meetings on the streetscapes, again, where there can be participation by certain members of the board as well. But, we will be reaching out. It won't be designed internally. Those concepts are going to be reviewed. There's going to be a report that's developed. We forecast that we're going to be bringing those reports back to the full board for review and consideration to make sure that The project is in agreement with everybody that's here. Those reports are very traditional to what we also present to the council. So your recommendation to the council is going to be the confirmation that that project is what it's supposed to be moving forward. Not just assigning the funding, not just making sure that it gets done, but actually the details of what's going to be included in that particular streetscape. It could be a complete streetscape like you've seen possibly as a part of Project 180 or Northwestern Avenue. It might be pieces of streetscapes, I think, as Aubrey has presented, new lighting, new sidewalks, ramps, and things like that. So we're going to make a switch as we kind of move from the overall process. This is going to be the board's involvement, and so I'm going to actually hand off the presentation at this point to Jeff Butler. Again, there's going to be a lot of coordination, a lot of work that also the planning department is going to be assisting in. Public Works is going to rely on a lot of that technical knowledge and some of those things that are part of streetscaping with planning and planning staff that you're going to, of course, be meeting here in the near future as well. So these next few slides, we're going to have Jeff present those to you and can answer any questions that you might have.
Morning. Here for Aubrey. She's actually out of town, so I'll take you through these next few slides. So you've seen these projects before. These are the streetscape enhancements that have been approved, that have been funded, and that we're moving forward with, or will be soon. And we put the ward on here so you can see which ward they're in. If you do decide that you prefer, as Eric suggested, to have a member from each ward in these committees, for these processes, that can help you see which ones are which. We have a couple in the gray, that are highlighted in gray there, that are fairly simple projects, probably won't be a need for participation on those, but the others are more complicated, and there's a lot of design work involved, and a lot of guidance will be needed from this board if you choose to, and the stakeholders. So just wanted to show that and give that to you for reference. So this next, we wanted to mention, on the advice of Public Works, there's one more project that we wanted to bring forward for your consideration, and that's the Walker Avenue Street Enhancement Project. So that's a cost of $3 million. And the reason we wanted to bring this forward is because after the initial group of street enhancements were selected and approved by this board, it was brought to our attention that this Walker Avenue really would be great to do in combination with the Paseo project. They're right next to each other, in fact, kind of overlapping. And for kind of technical reasons and also project construction reasons, and the difficulties of building in the Paseo area and trying to cause as little disruption as possible, it'd be nice to be able to do these at the same time. And so we're bringing that forward for your consideration, and if you agree, we'd like to ask that you recommend that project for funding at this time.
Any questions? And this is an additional to what has already been approved?
Yes.
The price on that was $3 million?
$3 million. And it's already in the implementation plan that you'll see later on. Yeah. There's still a few more projects that will come after this, but again, because it would be best, we felt like, Public Works felt like, to move it up so we could do it in conjunction with Paseo.
Any other questions? Okay, need a motion on that?
I do have one question, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
So regarding Eric's presentation previously about the board involvement, do we need to take any action on that, or is that's just what the process is being recommended to us?
So the process discussion didn't require any action. We're just trying to let you know that we're going to be reaching out to the chairman to start hopefully making assignments. If there's a concern that you don't want to participate or that you have some questions, I mean, I'm happy to do so, but no action required.
Yeah, no, I think the chair can handle it. Thanks. I just want to make sure. Yep.
Very good, very good. All right.
Yeah.
Back to the Walker project. Any other questions upon that?
Yes, I'm sorry. Did I miss, did you say that's an extension of the Paseo project?
It was listed as a separate project, but we'd like to essentially combine it with the Paseo.
So the Paseo at 4 million estimate and the Walker at 3 million estimate? So the-
Yes.
Okay. And that's number 8 on your list of proposed?
In the
Street
previous,
Right.
it's showing up here at the bottom, yeah, that's just we just put it at the bottom of the list.
Does rank not matter on
It-
this
it-
list?
Yes, it was ranked, I think, number 11 in the initial list that you saw, which is, it's well in line to be funded. It's just a matter of timing. And typically, the ranking is a little bit different from the feasibility considerations when we go out and we look at construction and feasibility and timing. A host of issues come into play, kind of the stakeholders and their readiness. In this case, it's construction issues. So feasibility, in this case, mattered enough that we felt like it was important to bring it up a few months. If we don't, it would be done when we come back to you for the next group of projects in a few months.
I didn't want to hurdle over other important rankings.
Oh, yeah. It was still in line to be funded just a little bit later.
Any other questions? Need a motion on this, please?
I'll move the item.
Moved.
Second.
Seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
I'll go ahead and move into the bicycle facilities presentation. This is similar. We have, so you've seen the list of proposed facilities. The line actually goes down a little bit further, the line being what's fundable or what we have sufficient funds to build. So we're moving forward with the first group of projects here. So 11 projects that you see on the screen. Again, there are several others that will be funded. We'll bring back to you at a later point. But these are the highest ranking and the most feasible projects. And here's a map showing where those are. So you'll see in red, actually, the projects that are proposed. And there's a little bit of reference material on this map as well. The green are existing trails, and the blue are our proposed bond projects. So you'll see those kind of north-south and east-west blue lines. That's a bond project that is actually going to be under design fairly quickly. And so it'll tie in nicely to these sales tax projects that are shown in red. So with that, if there are any questions, but the action item here is to recommend that group of projects for funding.
Jeff, yes, question. I know in prior meetings we had voted to resurface the trails at the Burt Cooper Trails, Lake Hefner. And
yes.
is that separate from that?
That is separate. So we have, this is the bicycle facilities group of projects, which is a separate group. The trails projects, we agreed. I think there were 2 new trails and several other trails that were going to be resurfaced, and those are moving forward. So this is a separate group of projects that are generally on-street facilities. There are some cases where it goes off-street, but for in most cases, it's on-street, striping, things of that nature.
Is there any signage involved in this $6.3 million group?
There would be some signage as needed.
That's included in that budget. So the 6.3 would come out of the 12 million total.
Yeah, the 12 million for bike facilities.
So, I have a question, just maybe as a point of clarification here. What are these will be put in bike lanes specifically?
Bike lanes, which would be, in some cases, depending on the condition of the street, we would need to do some resurfacing work, and so that may be included in the cost of the project. It may be, in a lot of cases, protected bike lanes where you'd have a little bit of a striped buffer with some bollards or delineators, as we like to call them. So that most of these projects will consist of that type of infrastructure. Depending on constraints and right-of-way issues, sometimes we'll have to maybe take it off-street, become part of a separate facility, but that's kind of prohibitively expensive, so normally we try to keep it on-street. There are a couple trail-like facilities in this group of projects, actually not in this particular list, they'll come in your next group. So May Avenue, for example, you'll see that later on.
I'm kind of curious, and it's mostly because I'm looking at numbers and the projects that are being proposed. On number 3, does that have a lot more to do with the geography and the connection there? Because I know I think we're doing something separately in regards to the trail system and getting the Deep Fork Trail system sort of going as well.
Yeah, that's a good example too. That is one of the 3 or 4 projects that are more trail-like, and those are pretty expensive. So in order to get the Deep Fork Trail completed, part of it was proposed for funding through this source of funds.
Okay. So do we know? And again, just because I think I get kind of easily confused. Do we know? So this piece is different and would propose to put in, I guess, the bike lanes there. But like I say, as I recall, I think even at the last meeting, we're talking about some other connections to complete that portion of the trail system that's coming out of trail funds as well.
Yes. Phase 3 of that project would be coming out of the trail funds. So it's a complicated project and quite an expensive one. The Deep Fork Trail, we have funds actually from 2007 bond, but those were insufficient. We also have some federal grant money. We were using some that you approved previously out of the trail bucket of money, and this last section would come out of this pot of money.
So if I might offer just a little bit of clarification, and I know it's confusing. You might recall in a previous presentation that was made, there's a comprehensive map that we were able to overlay all of the trails and a lot of the connectivity as a part of Bike Walk OKC. And I think that's probably a good reference for us to maybe bring back so that you can see those connections that are being made. I think the slide that's right after this one, this starts to show those connections. And so this is showing some of the red ones are these new bicycle infrastructure projects, but it is showing in green some of the connections to the trail system. Now, let's just kind of make sure that the $12 million that's being discussed for bicycle infrastructure is a different $12 million than the $12 million under this board that's also for trails. So they both have a $12 million budget. They're both going to serve some similar purposes, but I think as Jeff has kind of already reiterated, the trails are typically off-street, whereas the bike infrastructure is probably more on-street, but it could have some off-street when it makes the final connections or however it needs to work. So the bike would be more strictly for bike. We probably, on the on-street infrastructure, we're not going to see a lot of runners or walkers in those on-street bike facilities. But I just wanted to clarify, it's a different $12 million than what you saw last month for trails. The reason that we're presenting that to you this month is this will at least start that 50% of the bicycle infrastructure projects. So as that showed, it's not fully authorizing the full $12 million that's in the bicycle infrastructure. And the projects today are also included in that implementation plan amendment. As we get through this in the next presentation, the implementation plan today will allow us to have projects in every single category, all 5 categories of either resurfacing, trails, sidewalks, bike lanes, and streetscapes, all in the plan potentially this month following your recommendations. So we'll have a fully implemented plan. It won't be, all the funding's not yet identified. Generally, we're about the 50% mark in most of the projects. So we're going to be presenting a lot of additional projects to you in the next year.
Eric, I have a question for you. So in resurfacing the trails at Burr Cooper, we're basically doing the south part where the trails are. Not anything, no work is scheduled to be done on the dam itself, which is in horrifically bad shape as well. The whole trail system is in great need of work. But what we've already decided is putting money into the south, basically the south part of the Burr Cooper trails, and nothing on the dam itself. Is a dam considered? It's not considered a trail then, it's considered a roadway. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct. So I believe the dam portion is considered the access road for the Water Utilities Trust, but it's used as a part of the trail to loop around the lake. But the Burt Cooper Trail renovations are really to take care of all those trails needs, those asphalt-specific trails just for bicyclists, runners, walkers, rollerbladers. I can definitely bring that map of what those improvements look like back to you. I don't have it with me at the moment, but yes, you're correct. It did not resurface the entire loop around the lake.
That's sort of the concern, is that we are going to resurface basically the south half of the trail, but not the north part, not where the dam area is. And there's a lot of cracks that run perpendicular to the roadway. Don't know if the whole thing would need to be resurfaced, but it's sort of like, well, we're doing great work in getting the trails at Lake Hefner redone, but I think it's important to look at trying to redo the entire trail system.
And I think the one thing I'll offer, I'm going to ask Doug to maybe come up and help too, but the road itself is actually not considered a public road. It's a trust-owned road. I think with your concerns, we can probably share some of those with the Water Utilities Trust. So the road that goes around most of our city lakes are not, I mean, they're open to the public, but they're actually not City of Oklahoma City public streets. They're actually operated by the Oklahoma City Water Utilities Trust. But Doug might be able to share a little bit more insight on that.
Eric's correct in his statements. We have had communications with the Water Trust about the possibility of resurfacing the dam road, fixing some of the delineation up there as it relates to parking, no parking, and how the bike lanes go through there. But it is a Water Trust asset, and it'll be up to the Water Trust to decide whether they're going to do any work up there or not. But we have been communicating with them about the conditions of it and how it's being used, and we're trying to work through that with the trust.
So neither one of our $12 million funds could actually
At
go
this point in
there.
time, no, that's absolutely correct as well. We cannot use the tax extension, your funding source, or the GEO funding source to do that work at this point in time.
I see. Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions? We do need a motion on this.
Move to recommend bike project list.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Okay, last item, or at least the last part of the presentation, will be to discuss the implementation plan. I'll turn it back to Eric for that.
So this will hopefully be your last item for consideration today as we get ready for, this is probably the largest. So you've been presented a lot of information today, and there's been some previous approvals that have been given. But as we look, we kind of mentioned that about every few months that we're going to want to do an implementation plan amendment. And so what you have in your packet today is a proposed amendment to the plan that includes all the things that we just discussed. It's going to include the additional resurfacing projects. It's going to include the additional bike projects. It is including all of the previous approvals that are from previous meetings that also include the sidewalks and the trails. I know we didn't specifically present on those today, but last month we had actually covered those two topics. And so what you'll find is you'll find a fully comprehensive plan now that has all 5 project categories with projects in each category that will allow staff to proceed. What's also included in the plan, and it's getting quite large, is it's got the individual project worksheet, so you can actually see the individual project budgets for each project that are in there. This is that guidance for staff to make sure that we don't go over budget on particular projects. It's also what we're going to use as guidance for hiring those engineers and architects that will be working on some of the streetscapes and some of the trails and some of the other work. But with your consideration today, what's in here is something that we would actually place upon council's approval up on the city's website. This one is there now, but the September one, if approved by the council, would then replace the one that's online. So it's also a good reference for those individuals that need information or desire for more detail about the program and some of the work that you've done. It still includes the project history and the program goals. It also has a lot of the appendices that are in there that talk about some of the different processes and things that we've talked about so far this year. So with your consideration today, this will incorporate all of those new project lists that you've recommended. And with your approval, we would forward this to the City Council for their approval as well. I can answer any questions you might have about the implementation plan.
I do have one question. In the resolution, does it reference any of the wording of, also includes those roads coming over from the bond, the 2017 bond?
Yes, so let me go ahead and summarize those. It's a great question. So what you're going to see in this plan amendment is the following. I'm going to give you a lot of numbers really quickly, but I'm going to get it to a total. So what you have is a resolution that is $78 million, and the 78 is just for the amendment. But let me go ahead and summarize it so that you have the grand total. What this does is it adds 27 new arterial projects for $24 million. It adds 3 new residential for $6.5 million. It's going to add 8 enhancement project street enhancements for 19.4. It's going to add 15 new trail projects at 10.6. It's going to add 11 new bicycle infrastructure at 6.3. Now the sidewalks, remember, it's in different categories. So it's 1.2 million in a project downtown, 18 projects for 1.3 million in existing parks, 34 projects totaling $7.8 million in the PPA areas, and then 17 projects, $1.8 million that are connectivity for schools in the sidewalks category. So the grand total, recall that the entire program is $240 million. This is a $78 million amendment. It'll actually be about $114 million of the 240 total, which is about 47%. So we're just under that 50% mark with this plan's approval. There's still 50% of the projects yet to be identified and recommended by the board. So in the resolution, you're being asked to do additional $78 million in authorization to get us to that $114 million total. We haven't collected $114 million yet. This is just the authorization to spend up to $114 as it's collected, and there's a financial report that you'll receive in just a moment, too. So hopefully that answers just the whole big picture, I'm hoping. It's a lot of numbers, I know.
Any other questions from the board? All right, we need a motion on this too.
Move to recommend the resolution be forwarded to the council.
Very good. And second, please. Thank you. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Good.
I think just as a comment, as we get ready to move this forward, I know these are really large numbers, but one of the things that I'll comment to you that's in the implementation plan, realize that each of the projects also has a contingency. And the goal of the contingency is to make sure that we fund all of those projects without having to come back for additional authorizations. I've already mentioned that on some of the 16 early start resurfacing projects, we're under budget. And so we will be probably bringing back to you additional dollars that haven't been used on previous approvals. So when we talk about coming up on the 50% mark, that's true. But I think that you're also going to see that we have a lot of projects to authorize in this program. We've got a busy year ahead of us as we continue to look at lists, get into design on some of these other projects, and move forward. So, but I think we've had a great start. So that's going to conclude the implementation plan. I think we're going to move on to the next agenda item, Mr. Chairman, if you're ready.
Hello, I'm here to go over the financial summary. In August, we had 9.6 million collections and revenues. To date for the program, we have $58.6 million in collections, which is 5.1% above the projections. So we're doing quite well there and matching our projections and exceeding them. Currently, we have allocations of $39.4 million, which is about 67.2% of the overall collections. Of that, total encumbered is 24.9, which is just over 40% that's encumbered and ready to be spent. And total to date, we have $2.5 million in expenditures to date for the program, and of that, about $900,000 was spent in August. If there's any questions on the financial summary?
Yes. Originally, we were projecting of getting about $10 million in sales tax per month, and we were a little bit ahead of that, correct?
Correct, we are. About 5% ahead of that to date.
Good, good. I guess we, at some point, will find, toward the end of our 27 months, hopefully we'll have an overage and can find good homes for that.
Definitely, and then with the interest income that's coming in as well.
Great.
Okay.
Any other questions? Need a motion to receive that?
I move that we receive.
Seconded and moved. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Thank you.
you. Next item is other business. Any other business of the board? Okay. Number 6, directors' reports.
So with the recommendation of the implementation plan today, we started doing some projection for the remaining meetings of the year. And I think the way we look for October is we may not have a need to meet in October. We've gotten a lot of approvals and a lot of authorization here in the last 9 meetings that we've had. I think it's just that point where we can, unless there's some updates that the board may want to see in October, we can cover those in a November meeting. But right now, there's just kind of forecast that we'll work very closely with the chairman, but we may choose to not hold the October meeting unless something comes up before then. So just kind of an announcement of sorts, and we'll try to make sure that we make that decision very quickly so we can get a notice out to you very soon. I think the only other thing following today is that with the consultant selection and with the approval of the streetscapes, as soon as the City Council receives your recommendation and hopefully also approves the implementation plan, we're going to want to proceed very quickly, and we'll work again with the chairman very closely on identifying who would like to participate on consultant interviews. And so that's a process that's going to begin almost immediately. And again, I would forecast that being started in late September, early October as we get ready to really engage some new projects. And again, we'll be bringing those reports back to the board, but we just don't have any of those reports to share today. So, but with that, I can answer any other questions or anything that you have from the meeting today, or maybe something that you'd like to see coming up. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next item would be comments. First would be comments from our board.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to just say thank you to our public information officer who's helping to share information about all of these projects that are out there. I got online the other day and realized there's a lot of communication that's going on, and just appreciate that's helping to communicate everything that's taking place here, and appreciate our city employees doing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a brief comment, just because I tend to ask a lot of questions, but I had the opportunity to speak with one of my colleagues, and I think it's, I also want to sort of just to give some appreciation for city staff from where we started to where we are in getting the updates. And I think if we don't meet next month, I would, which may make some sense, I would encourage to continue that sort of stream of information, because it gives me a lot of confidence in what we're doing. Specifically to see the way you guys are implementing the programs and these projects, and it seems like we're consistently, I think we're being conservative in our approach, which is good, because you guys are getting things done. We're sort of moving pretty efficiently, pretty quickly, and then actually really being good stewards of the resources that are being expended, I think, by looking at some of the updates, the status updates, and seeing how the expenditures are lining out. So that all of that's really encouraging, because it makes me feel like we're all being, as good awards as we can of the taxpayer dollars. So appreciate that.
Thank you. Well, I certainly echo what both you fellows have said. I think, it shouldn't be taken for granted. I was around when we first started the trails at Lake Hefner, and we built some trail, and then we found, fortunately, some ICE-T funds, federal dollars, to finish the east side. And it took many, many years to get that trail complete. And the city now has the independence through the tax extension, through maps, through the GO bond, to really do some wonderful things in this city. And like the Plaza project and the Paseo project, those areas of town are wonderful places. I have friends that come back to Oklahoma City that haven't been here for 20 years and are amazed what's going on with the sidewalks and the trails. And I certainly have great appreciation for the city and the city staff, but also for this board, for you guys being here and being part of this. We're writing a wonderful history together. Let's just keep the momentum going. Any other comments, board? Comments from staff? Comments from citizens? Very good. Everyone have a safe day. Appreciate everyone being here. We're adjourned.